They called him the GOAT of high-life music. The name Jett Cole meant one thing in Ghana: a music legend. Jett didn't just sing. He commanded. Women cried when he held the microphone close to his chest. Men lifted their phones high to record every second. When he stretched his arms wide, it felt like he was embracing the entire country. He wore tailored suits that fit like they were stitched onto his skin. Gold chains rested lightly against his collarbone. His smile was always easy, confident, untouchable. From the stage, he looked invincible. But fame is a bright light, and bright lights cast long shadows. It all started with a surgery, and then there were no lights, no screaming fans, no stage, only the slow, steady sound of waves hitting the shore of the coast. Jett sat on the veranda of his White House overlooking the ocean. The house was large, built high enough to catch the sea breeze and painted clean and bright against the blue sky. From a distance, it looked like a palace. Up close, the salt air had begun to peel the paint at the edges. Even strong houses feel the weight of the sea. Jett looked thinner now. The surgery had taken more out of him than he admitted publicly. His shoulders seemed smaller without the stage jackets. A light blanket covered his legs even though the afternoon sun was warm. His phone lay beside him on a small glass table. It buzzed once. He glanced at the screen. Iris is calling. He let it ring, not because he didn't love her, but because love feels different when you are weak. He leaned back slowly and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, no one was asking Jett Cole for anything, and the silence felt both peaceful and dangerous. Inside the house, framed photographs lined the hallway walls. Jett and Iris Cole, smiling at award ceremonies. Jett holding their newborn son in a London hospital room. Family vacations, coordinated outfits, bright smiles. To the world, they were unbreakable. A partnership built on loyalty and ambition. Iris handled interviews when rumors surfaced. Iris managed school schedules. Iris protected his name like it was her own. She lived mostly in London with the children so they could attend the best schools. Jett traveled constantly between continents for shows. That was the agreement. Success demanded sacrifice. But sacrifice creates distance. And distance creates silence. Jett stood slowly from the veranda chair and winced as a sharp pain shot through his side. He steadied himself against the railing. Once, he could perform for 3 hours without losing breath. Now, walking 10 steps felt like climbing a hill. He hated that feeling. He hated needing help. There is a saying that, when a lion is wounded, the forest grows quiet. The forest was quiet now. And Jett Cole, the man who once filled stadiums with sound, was learning what it meant to sit alone with the sea. He believed being home would heal him. He believed the gates would keep the world out. He believed he was in control. Thousands of miles away, across the cold blue water of the ocean, lived Iris Cole. If Jett Cole was the king of the stage, Iris was his undisputed queen. She was the kind of woman who always looked perfect. Her hair was never out of place. Her clothes were expensive. And her smile was as bright as a camera flash. Jett adored her. He shouted Iris's name from the stage during his biggest concerts, pointed into the crowd as if she were standing right there, and always told the world she was the secret to his success. In interviews, he called her his anchor. At home, they built a life in London, raising 3 beautiful children in a house filled with framed memories and careful routines. But love can look solid and still be quietly cracking. Their marriage was like a beautiful bridge, elegant, admired, and strong from a distance. Yet underneath, small fractures had begun to spread. Iris lived in London. Jett lived in Ghana. And soon, they were separated by more than just miles. They were separated by silence. And distance has a way of making even the strongest ropes grow thin. Iris would call Jett late at night, hoping for a warm word. Sometimes he would answer, but his voice sounded cold and far away, like he was talking to a stranger. Other times, the phone would just ring and ring until it went silent. She would tell herself he was just tired from his surgery. She would whisper to herself that he just needed space to heal his body. You see, Iris was playing by the rules. But the sea doesn't have rules. And in that quiet house by the coast, the rules were about to be rewritten forever. The big white house in Cape Coast stood behind tall iron gates. From far away it looked like a palace. But up close you could see that even a palace has its scars. The salt from the ocean had started to peel the white paint, and the flakes fell to the ground like snow. Even the strongest houses feel the weight of the sea. That was where Jett Cole came to rest. He didn't come to perform or to impress anyone. He just came to breathe. The morning Zuri arrived. The air was cool and quiet. She stood outside the gates holding a small cloth bag tied at the top. Inside were 2 faded dresses, a comb, and a pair of worn sandals she rarely used. She was 19 years old. In her village, life was simple. You wake up before the sun. You fetch water. You sweep the yard. But Zuri had always looked beyond those small things. It wasn't greed in her heart. It was a deep hunger. Not a hunger for food, but a hunger for something more. When the gates opened, she stepped inside slowly. The marble floors felt cold and strange under her feet. The house smelled of medicine and expensive perfume. It was bigger than any place she had ever dreamed of. She tried not to stare at the gold on the walls. Inside, she saw him, the legend himself. He sat near the window facing the sea. Without the stage lights and the makeup, Jett Cole looked different. He didn't look weak exactly. He just looked tired. He looked at her. She quickly lowered her eyes. "Are you the housekeeper my sister employed?" "Yes, sir," she said softly. That was all. Her job description was clear. Clean the rooms, cook light meals, and remind him to take his pills. Jett's sister had told her. She was told to move quietly and stay out of the way. And she did exactly that. She rose before the sun. She scrubbed the salt from the windows until they sparkled. She folded his expensive clothes with shaking hands. She began to notice things. She noticed which pills made him restless. She noticed how he stared at the ocean for a long time after his phone calls ended. On the hallway wall, there were framed pictures of his wife, Iris Cole, smiling beside him. Their 3 children were dressed neatly for school in London. In every photo, Jett looked proud. Zuri stopped in front of one frame. She was curious. She wondered, what does it feel like to be chosen openly by a man like this? She quickly looked away and went back to her work. The other workers in the house barely spoke to her. To them, she was just another village girl who was lucky to have a job. They didn't see the way she studied everything. They didn't see the way his laughter faded the moment he hung up the phone with his wife. They didn't see the way loneliness sat beside him like a second shadow. People say, if a house is quiet for too long, it is either at peace or it is waiting. Zuri did not come to this house with a plan to hurt anyone. She came because she had to. Her father's fishing nets were torn and useless. Her younger brother had to leave school because there was no money for his books. This job meant her family could eat and her brother could return to school. That first night, she lay on a thin mattress in the small back room. The ocean roared softly in the distance. She had never slept so close to something so wide and endless. She wasn't thinking about power or money. She was thinking about survival. In the main house, Jett Cole sat alone in the dark. He had just ended a call with his wife, and the silence felt heavier than ever. 2 lonely people slept under one roof that night. Neither of them knew that loneliness, when left alone, can grow into something that fame cannot control. Outside, the sea kept moving. Inside the big white house, the days became quiet and slow. Outside, people still called him a legend. They played his songs on the radio and at parties and posted old concert videos online. But inside, Jett struggled to even stand without help. Zuri became the person who saw everything. She brought his soup with ginger to settle his stomach. She reminded him about his pills. She opened the curtains slowly so the light would not hurt his eyes. She learned the way his face tightened when the pain returned. Caregiving changes things. You cannot pretend to be powerful in front of someone who sees you when you are weak. One afternoon, the heat was heavy. The air did not move at all. Jett Cole tried to walk to the porch alone, but his legs gave way. He caught himself against the wall, gasping for breath. Zuri was there before anyone else. She did not shout. She did not call the guards. She simply slipped under his arm and carried his weight. For a moment, the famous superstar leaned fully on a 19-year-old girl who smelled like soap and sunshine. "I'm fine," he said, his voice full of embarrassment. "You are tired," she replied gently. She did not let go until he was sitting safely. When she wiped the sweat from his forehead, her hands were steady, but her heart was not. She knew she should step back. She knew this was not her place. Yet she did not move away. He noticed. He began to talk more after that. Not about music or fame, but about the pressure of his life. He talked about being needed by everyone but understood by no one. "Sometimes I feel like I live for other people," he said one evening. "Even my own house feels like it belongs to someone else." He should not have said that. For a second, he thought of his wife, Iris. He thought of her soft voice on the phone and his children waiting for their video calls. He felt a sharp pang of guilt, but he pushed the thought away. He was too tired to be guilty. Zuri listened without interrupting. She had never seen London or a stadium, but she understood feeling small in a world that felt too big. "My father says when the ocean is loud, you cannot hear your own thoughts," she said quietly. He looked at her differently after that. Not as a worker, but as comfort. Then came the night the generator failed. The house went dark. Only the silver moonlight from the ocean slipped through the curtains. Zuri walked into his room with a single candle and his pills. The tiny flame shook between them. When she handed him the glass of water, their fingers touched. This time she did not pull away. She felt the danger. She felt the wrongness of it, like walking too close to the edge of a cliff. But she also felt chosen. He did not remove his hand either. He reached up slowly and moved a braid from her shoulder. His heart told him to stop. He knew this would ruin everything. But the loneliness was louder than his conscience. "The sea is loud tonight," he whispered. "It is, sir," she answered, her voice shaking. In that moment, the line between employer and maid did not just fade. It snapped. It felt dangerous, like a bridge breaking under too much weight. No promises were made, but something had crossed a point that could not be undone. A spark does not ask permission before it burns. Outside, the waves kept moving. Inside, the fire had started, and neither of them was ready for the smoke. They say news does not travel by phone, travels by eyes. And the manager had sharp eyes. His name was Dex Mensa. He and Jett Cole had grown up on the same dusty street. They shared roasted corn after school. They chased the same dreams. When Jett became famous, Dex became the one who signed the papers and counted the money. People said he was loyal, and he was. But loyalty and envy sometimes sleep in the same bed. The afternoon he arrived unannounced. The sea was restless. The wind pushed hard against the palm trees. Zuri was coming out of Jett's hallway when she saw him standing near the entrance. She froze, not because she had done something wrong, but because she suddenly felt seen. Dex smiled. It was a calm smile. "Good afternoon," he said. "Good afternoon, sir," Zuri replied, lowering her eyes. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited. He noticed everything. The open curtains, the second teacup on the small table. The way Jett's door was slightly open. Small things. But small things tell big stories. In the living room, Jett was sitting upright, trying to look stronger than he felt. "Dex," he said with forced energy. "You should have called." "I was nearby," Dex answered. "Friends don't need appointments." He sat down slowly and studied his friend. "You look better." "I am better." Dex's eyes shifted briefly toward the hallway. "Good," he said, "because London is asking questions." The word London hung heavy in the room. Jett looked away. "I will travel soon." Soon. That word again. Dex leaned back in his chair. "You know, sometimes when a man stays away too long, people begin to replace him." Jett frowned. "Replace me?" Dex shrugged lightly. "Not in music. In life." The air grew tight. Zuri entered quietly with water. She placed the glass on the table. Dex watched her hands. Watched how Jett's voice softened when he thanked her. watched how she did not rush out immediately. There it was. Not a confession, just a shift. When she finally left the room, Dex leaned forward. "You are healing," he said carefully. "But you are also vulnerable." Jett stiffened. "What are you trying to say?" "I am saying this town is small. Walls have ears. And people talk." Later that evening, Dex walked through the house alone, pretending to take a call. He paused near Jett's bedroom door. On the small table by the bed sat something that did not belong. A simple black hair tie. It was not Iris's. Dex picked it up. He stared at it for a long second. Then he placed it back exactly where it had been. He did not need proof. He only needed patience. In the courtyard, Zuri felt his eyes on her again. Her chest tightened. For the first time since she arrived, fear replaced curiosity. She told herself nothing had happened. But something had. Dex stepped outside and dialed a number. He did not speak loudly. "Yes," he said calmly into the phone. "We may have a problem." He ended the call and looked toward the ocean. When a friend stops warning you and starts watching you, be afraid. Inside the house, Jett believed his secret was still small. But secrets do not stay small. And Dex Mensa had just decided he would not be the last to know. Distance is a strange thing. Sometimes it makes love stronger. Sometimes it makes silence louder. In London, the cold pressed against the windows of Iris Cole's kitchen. She stood by the marble counter, staring at her phone like it might explain something she did not want to understand. It had been 3 days since she last spoke to her husband. In their world, that was not normal. She told herself he was resting, healing, busy. She called. 1 ring dot, 2 rings dot, 5 dot, 10. Then voicemail. Her chest tightened. A marriage rarely breaks in one day, her mother once told her. It cracks quietly. The phone was vibrating on a polished wooden table near the open window. Jett Cole was not inside. He was in the garden. The air was warm. The sea breeze carried the smell of salt and green leaves. Zuri walked beside him slowly, pointing to birds resting in the trees. "That one only comes before rain," she said softly. He smiled. Out there, he did not feel like a superstar. He did not feel like someone people demanded things from. He felt light. Through the open window, the faint buzzing of his phone drifted outside. Zuri heard it first. She paused. "Sir, your phone." He stopped walking. For a second, just a second, he almost turned back. He pictured Iris standing in their kitchen. He pictured his children arguing over homework. He imagined her waiting for his voice. Guilt hit him sharply. He knew he should answer. He knew. But answering meant stepping back into responsibility. Into questions. Into reminders of the life waiting for him. He looked at Zuri instead. With her, there were no expectations. No reports about school fees. No discussions about image or brand. Just quiet attention. The phone kept buzzing. "Let it ring," he said finally. His voice firmer than he felt. The buzzing stopped. Inside the house, Auntie Rose stood still. She had worked for the family for 10 years. She had seen Jett rise from a local singer to a national treasure. She had held Iris's first baby in her arms. She loved that woman like her own child. She looked out the window. She saw them walking close together. Not touching, but close enough. She felt something shift in her stomach. When the phone went silent, she did something she had never done before. She picked up the house phone and dialed London. The call connected quickly. "Auntie Rose." Iris's voice was tight. "Why isn't he answering? Is he okay? Did something happen with the surgery?" Auntie Rose swallowed. The truth felt heavy in her mouth. "He is healing," she said slowly. "But the house is changing." Silence. "You should come home," Auntie Rose continued, her voice barely steady. "Not next month. Now." On the other side of the world, Iris did not cry. She did not shout. She did not ask for details. She simply ended the call and looked toward the hallway where her suitcase was stored. Distance does not destroy love. Silence does. Back in the garden, Zuri felt the air change. She did not know about the phone call yet, but she felt something coming. She had not planned for this to move so fast. When she reached for Jett's hand, it was not just desire she felt. It was fear. He squeezed her fingers lightly, unaware that the world he was avoiding had just begun to move toward him. They say, when a man ignores one call, he answers another. That night, the wind didn't just blow, it howled. Pushed hard against the big white house, rattling the windows and making the doors complain. The ocean was no longer gentle. It sounded like a giant thing in pain, slamming against the rocks again and again. Inside, the house felt smaller than usual. The storm made every room feel like it was holding its breath. Jett Cole sat in the living room with no lights on. He didn't want light. Light showed too much. He watched lightning flash over the water, and each time it lit the walls, he saw the framed photos of Iris and the children. Their smiles looked bright and far away, like they belonged to another man. He knew Iris was coming. Auntie Rose had said it clearly, and Jett could feel it in his chest like a warning bell. The world of airport hugs and camera smiles was moving back toward him, fast, and it was about to crash into the world of the girl in the kitchen. He rubbed his hands together, restless. He told himself, I will fix this, but he didn't know how. Zuri entered quietly to close the heavy shutters. She didn't turn on the lights either. She moved through the room like she was trying not to make noise. When the thunder cracked, she jumped, and the iron latch slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a loud clank. It was a small sound, but in the silence after thunder, it felt huge. Jett was on his feet before he could think. He reached out to steady her, his hands landing on her shoulders. Her skin was warm. His hands paused there a second too long. Lightning flashed again. Their eyes met. In that moment, there was no sir and no maid. There were only two people standing too close in a house that felt too quiet. I have to go back, he whispered, his voice breaking. Iris, she's coming. The cameras, the life, all of it, it's coming back. Zuri did not step away. She did not cry. She held his gaze like she had been holding her breath for weeks. And what happens to me? She asked softly. Do I go back to nothing? Her voice wasn't angry. It was scared. Jett felt shame rise in him, sharp and hot. In another flash of lightning, he saw something that made his stomach twist. His daughter's face, her small hands waving at the airport dot. Her voice was asking, Daddy, when are you coming? His grip loosened. For 1 second, he almost stepped back. He could still stop. He could still choose right. But loneliness is loud, and pride is louder. Zuri stood there, close enough for him to feel her breath, close enough to remind him how easy it was to forget the world outside. I can't go back to struggling, she whispered. It wasn't a threat. It was fear. Another gust of wind ripped one shutter open, and rain sprayed into the room, cold and sharp. The candle on the table trembled. The flame flickered once, then died. Darkness swallowed them. In that darkness he made a choice. Not because he didn't love his wife. Not because he didn't love his children. But because in that moment, he wanted to feel needed more than he wanted to feel responsible. He pulled Zuri closer and Zuri gave in. And something inside him broke. The house felt different. The deed had been done. Jett sat alone afterward, staring at the wet floor where rain had blown in. The lightning was gone now. Only silence remained. Silence feels heavier after a mistake. Zuri walked back to her small room slowly, not smiling, not celebrating. Her hands were shaking. She pressed her back against the closed door and stared at the ceiling, breathing hard like someone who had run too far. She had crossed a line, but she didn't know yet if she had stepped into safety or into fire. When you bury a line in the sand, the tide will uncover it. The storm passed before sunrise, but what they had done would not wash away with the rain. And somewhere far away, in a cold city across the ocean, a suitcase was being packed. A plane ticket was being booked, and Iris Cole was coming home. The sun rises bright and sharp, showing everything the wind tried to hide. Broken branches, wet sand, leaves stuck to walls. Nothing escapes the light. Jett Cole stood on the veranda, staring at the yard as workers swept away the mess. He looked calm, as if nothing had happened. But something had. He felt it in his chest, heavy and cold. He looked down at his hands. The same hands that had reached for Zuri in the dark now felt unfamiliar. He pressed them against the railing to steady himself. Iris would be landing soon. He pictured her walking through the airport with their children. He imagined her smile, the way she always carried snacks from London because she knew he missed small comforts. His throat tightened. Every time he pictured her face, he felt like he was swallowing salt. Inside the yard, Zuri moved quietly with a basket of wet laundry. Usually, she kept her eyes down. Today she didn't. She paused and looked up at him. Not proudly, not boldly, just steadily. There was something different in her face. Not victory, not joy, just awareness. She knew something had changed. "Good morning," she said softly. Her voice carried across the yard more than she expected. The other workers slowed for a moment. They didn't look directly, but they noticed. In a house like this, people sense shifts before they hear them. Jett couldn't answer. He turned and walked back inside. His heart was beating too fast. At his desk, he stood still for a long time before opening the drawer. Inside was a thick envelope of cash. He stared at it. This will protect everyone, he told himself. This will end it quietly. He picked it up and called for Dex. When Dex entered, he saw the envelope immediately. He didn't need an explanation. "Give this to her," Jett said, keeping his voice low. "Tell her she's done well. Tell her she should visit her family for a while." He couldn't say more. Dex took the envelope slowly. "You think money will fix this?" he asked, not angry, just calm. Jett looked away. "Just do it." Dex found Zuri behind the kitchen, rinsing plates in a metal basin. The water was cloudy. Her hands were red from soap. He held out the envelope. "He says thank you. He says you should go home for some time." Zuri stared at the money. Her heart began to pound. For 1 second, just one, she imagined taking it, going back to her village, pretending none of this had happened. But she knew she would never be the same girl who walked through those gates. She wiped her hands slowly on her dress. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly.
No smile.
No drama, just certainty. Dex studied her face. He expected anger or tears. He saw neither, only something steady. "Be careful," he said softly. "Storms don't always end when the rain stops." She didn't respond. She walked past him and back into the house. Dex stood alone in the sunlight, the envelope still in his hand. For the first time, he understood something clearly. This was no longer a mistake. It was a situation. On the veranda, Jett watched Zuri re-enter the house. A small wave of panic rose in him. He had tried to push the tide back with paper, but you cannot sweep water uphill. The yard was clean again. But inside that big white house, the ground had shifted. 3 weeks passed after the storm. The house was no longer quiet. Iris had arrived from London with the children, and the mansion felt alive again. Laughter echoed through the hallways. Suitcases rolled across polished floors. The smell of chocolate and imported perfume mixed with the salt air from the sea. Everything looked perfect. Iris posted a short video of Jett sitting in the sun, their youngest child wrapped around his neck. "Healing is better when we are together. #family first." Thousands of hearts flooded the comments. Inside the house, Jett felt like he was walking on glass. He smiled for photos. He laughed at the right moments. But his eyes moved constantly, to doors, to hallways, to the kitchen. Every shadow felt dangerous. Then came the morning that changed everything. Zuri was alone behind the kitchen, rinsing plates in a stone sink. A sudden wave hit her stomach. She froze. Then she bent over sharply, gripping the edge of the sink as her body turned against her. She tried to stay quiet. She didn't want anyone to hear. But the world does not always protect secrets. Auntie Rose stood in the doorway. She didn't need an explanation. She had raised children. She had seen this before. She stepped forward slowly. "How long?" she asked gently. Zuri wiped her mouth and stood up straight, but her hands were shaking. "I don't know," she whispered. For the first time since the storm, her eyes looked unsure. She hadn't planned this. She hadn't calculated this. She had known the risk, but knowing and living it are different things. Auntie Rose looked toward the balcony where Jett and Iris were having breakfast with the children. "You should have taken the money," she said softly. Zuri looked down at her hands. "Would it have changed this?" she asked quietly. Auntie Rose had no answer. By afternoon, the house was full of guests. Laughter, conversation, glasses clinking. Iris moved gracefully between people, proud and glowing. Jett escaped into his study. He stood at his desk staring at a contract for a new world tour. The words blurred. There was a knock. Soft. He didn't answer. The door opened anyway. Zuri stepped inside. He felt the air leave his lungs. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "My wife is in the next room." Zuri closed the door slowly behind her. Her face was calm, but not cold. "I didn't come to cause trouble," she said. "I came because I don't know what to do." That surprised him. He had expected anger. Or demand. Not uncertainty. She placed her hand lightly on her stomach. The gesture was small, but it changed the room. His eyes followed the movement. "No," he said under his breath. "No." "I haven't told anyone," she said. "I only found out this morning." His mind raced. Images flashed through him. Iris laughing in the garden, his children splashing in the pool, Dex watching everything. He swallowed hard. "Are you sure?" he asked. She nodded once. Silence filled the space between them. Then the question came, heavy and quiet. "Is it mine?" The words tasted bitter. Zuri looked at him. There was no smile, no threat, just a long, steady stare. "I was with you," she said softly. It wasn't an answer. It was a reminder. He sank into his chair. He didn't feel like a superstar. He felt like a man who had opened a door he could not close. Outside the study window, he could hear Iris's laughter drifting through the air. It sounded innocent, untouched. Inside the room, everything had shifted. Zuri stood still for a moment longer. "I don't want to ruin anyone," she said quietly. "But I'm not going back to nothing either." That was not a threat. It was survival. He understood that too well. When she left the study, he didn't call her back. He just sat there, staring at the contract for a tour that suddenly felt impossible. There's a saying that a seed does not shout when it is planted, but it always grows. Outside, the house looked perfect. Inside, something small and silent had begun to take root. And no one, not Iris, not the children, not the world, could see it yet. But it was there, and it was growing. The lunch on the lawn was beautiful. White tablecloths moved gently in the breeze. Glasses clinked. Laughter carried across the yard. The photographers moved carefully, capturing what they called the comeback of the year. To anyone watching, the Cole family looked unshakable. Iris sat at the center of it all, glowing. She reached for her husband's hand often. She leaned into him when guests praised his strength. She believed she had come home at the perfect time. Jett played his part flawlessly. He smiled on cue. He lifted his children into his arms. He kissed his wife's cheek when the cameras turned toward them. But under the table, his legs would not stop trembling. Every time Zuri walked past with a tray, the air in his chest tightened. He did not look at her. He could not. But he felt her presence the way a man feels heat from a fire he pretends is not burning. Zuri did her work quietly. She did not rush Dot. She did not hide Dot. She did not seek his eyes. There was no drama in her movements. Just calm. A calm that unsettled him more than anger ever could. She understood something Iris did not. A wedding ring is public. Dot. A child is permanent. As the sun lowered, the guests began to leave. Iris hugged her husband tightly by the car. "I'm so glad I came," she whispered. "Everything feels right again." Jett held her longer than usual. "I know," he said softly. He told himself something then. "I will fix this quietly. Dot. No one needs to be hurt." Across the yard, Dex stood near the gate, watching everything without looking like he was watching at all. He had the envelope of cash in his jacket. He had not given it to Zuri. Not because he forgot, because timing is power. When the yard finally emptied and the house grew still, Jett went inside and locked himself in his study. He picked up his phone. "There's a small house near Elmina," he told Dex when he answered. "It needs to be handled discreetly. Utilities under another name. No paper trail leading back to me." Dex was quiet for a second. "And the girl?" he asked. "She stays provided for," Jett replied. Quietly, he ended the call before Dex could respond. Inside her small back room, Zuri sat on the edge of her bed. The house was quiet now. Iris and the children were asleep. The laughter from the afternoon had faded. Zuri placed her hand over her stomach. It was still flat, still invisible. She did not smile. She did not cry. She was thinking. In the main house, Iris posted one last photo before bed. She and Jett stood side by side, hands intertwined. The caption read, "Our love is an anchor." Hundreds of comments poured in within minutes. Perfect couple, true love, goals. Jett scrolled through the comments silently from the darkness of his study. He felt two things at once. Bride and fear. Silence is not empty. It is waiting. The house looked peaceful. But somewhere inside that big white house, something small had taken root. And roots grow deeper when no one is watching. If you were watching this unfold, what would you do? Do you think Zuri is a villain for trapping Jett? Or is she simply fighting for her family's survival in a world that never gave her a chance? Dex has the power to destroy this entire secret with one phone call to Iris. Why is he keeping the money and staying silent? Is he truly a friend? Or is he playing a much longer, darker game? If you were Iris, would you rather be told the truth now, or keep living this perfect life while your husband's secrets grow in the dark? Watch out for episode 2.